One of the more fun parts of watching wrestling is seeing someone progress up the ranks over the years. Yes, like with other sports, watching someone go from rookie all the way to the top of the pile gives you an extra sense of investment in that person's career. And in 2025, there have been several wrestlers who have leveled up significantly, giving us all some great TV in the process. But who has improved the most? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with Dominic Mysterio. Sure, he might have had a rough first couple of years of his career where it really felt like he was going to be a David Flair instead of a Charlotte Flair, but once he turned heel and joined the Judgment Day in 2022, something happened, and Dominic Mysterio was able to transform into one of the most effective heels in all of wrestling. Even then, though, there was a sense that there was still probably a ceiling on how high the son of Rey Mysterio could soar. Just as well, he didn't agree with this then, and that was what led to a situation where, in 2025, he managed to reach another level of success again. How did he do this? Well, by becoming a finished product at last. Yes, Dirty Dom had been great already before 2024 started, but there were still some notable holes in his game. In 2025, however, these holes would be filled as he became a pretty decent wrestler bell to bell, as well as just a fantastic character. And fans noticed this too, which was exactly why when he entered a fatal four-way match over the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 41, he was treated like a babyface king despite being a sleazy heel. Obviously then, when he won this match, it ended up being one of the highlights of the weekend, as it felt like something special was happening with the San Diego native. And those feelings would prove to be right because, as the months have gone on, Dirty Dom has continued to get positive reactions from crowds, all while he's maintained an arguably even stronger presence on Raw every week than he had done before. After all, this has been the year that his improved in-ring skills and greater level of overness with fans has seen him go on a hell of a run as Intercontinental Champion. Then, as if this wasn't enough, there's also the fact that 2 of John Cena's final dates in his retirement tour have been dedicated to him working with the younger Mysterio, and in that second bout at Survivor Series, even putting him over. What does this mean? Well, it means that, provided Gunther doesn't beat Big Match John during Mr. Hustle, Loyalty, and Respect's final bout, then Dominic will be the last person to ever pin him. And that's quite a coup for a man so many wrote off almost immediately after he debuted. But is it a bigger jump up the ladder than our next subject has managed? Well, let's find out by looking at them now, the woman who goes by the name of Naomi. Now again, Naomi is someone who clearly had something long before 2025 came around. Come on now, it was as far back as 2017 that she was winning the SmackDown Women's title for the first time. But the former year has really been another thing altogether for the Floridian in terms of her going to a level few could have foreseen. What happened this year that took her to this stage? Well, a large part of her rise here could be put down to an excellent heel turn. Yes, after she turned on her former partners Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill, Naomi would unlock a whole new side of herself, with this side being a killer heel which quickly skyrocketed her sense of relevance within WWE. Seriously, in the months before and after WrestleMania 41, the wife of Jimmy Uso felt like one of the most interesting characters on all of SmackDown. And this made it seem inevitable that she'd be winning that Women's World title before long. It was just a case of when was it going to happen. And that when finally arrived after she won the Money in the Bank contract at the titular PLE in June, and then from there went on to cash in on Io Sky at Evolution just 1 month later. Sure, she'd have to vacate this title just 36 days later, but that was only because she was pregnant with her first child. That's right, the only thing which could slow down Naomi in 2025 was a baby. When it came to her work in WWE though, well, that was just too good to be dismissed. So when she eventually returns then, we expect she'll be right back at the top of the women's division, as there's still a lot to be mined from her proceed with caution heel gimmick. Really, if she's not right back in the title picture when she returns, then Triple H is missing the boat in a major way. And once that run is played out, there's probably an equally great babyface run to be had for the Floridian. Would all of this be true had it not been for her great 2025? Quite possibly, as this was the year she felt like a true superstar on the level of people like Rhea Ripley for the first time. And Naomi isn't the only woman in WWE who's had a real game-changing 2025. No, there have been plenty of others who we could say the same thing about, ladies who have broken out from the pack in a very significant way during the last 12 months. And if we need another specific example of this, we need only head down toward NXT to look at our next subject, the current NXT Women's Champion, Jacy Jayne. Now, here's one which, in many ways, came as a surprise. After all, while everybody already knew that both Dominic Mysterio and Naomi had something special prior to 2025, as January of this year hit, the jury was still very much out on Jacy Jayne. Why was this? Well, because throughout her career prior to that, she'd yet to truly break out. Hell, this was why, even when she was a member of Toxic Attraction alongside Mandy Rose and Gigi Dolan, she felt very much like the third most important member of that stable. Sure, she would form her own factions after that one disbanded, one named Fatal Attraction, which would see her be the leader, but even then, there was still a feeling that Jacy might not be it when it came to the women of the NXT roster. And then something happened. On May 27th of this year, in one of the biggest upsets in recent WWE memory, the Florida-born star would topple Stephanie Vaquer to win the NXT Women's title. Needless to say then, this was a hell of an achievement for her, and one which caused a lot of people to start paying much closer attention to what she was doing. After all, this was a situation where Jayne was now being asked to shoulder the weight of an entire division. How would she do in this role? Pretty great as it happened, because rather than crumble under this weight, she'd rise to the occasion, to the point that, after she briefly dropped the gold to Tatum Paxley, she'd win it right back again, and from there be able to call herself a two-time world champion on the developmental brand. So really at this point, it just feels like a matter of time until she gets that main roster call-up, and that's something which would have been far from a guarantee as recently as 2024. But then, we suppose that's the point of having a developmental brand. It allows performers to find themselves by experimenting and trying out new things, failing again and again until eventually they discover something which works. It's the same way that anyone learns their craft, and it's worked out big time for Jacy Jayne because it's allowed her to have the 2025 she'd had, something which may not have been the case if she had already been moved up to the main roster. What will 2026 see her do? Will it be Raw, SmackDown, or more NXT for her? We guess we'll just have to wait and see how things play out and where this sudden wave of momentum takes her next. Of course, even if Jacy does get called up, it won't be like the NXT Women's division will be short of future prospects, because there has been another lady there who's had something of a breakout 2025, a lady who's our next subject as it happens, so let's waste no more time and get down to talking about her right now then, the one, the only, Sol Ruka. Yes, like with some of the other people we've looked at today already, Sol Ruka was someone whose potential was already clear prior to 2025. And we say that because as soon as she arrived on the NXT roster back in 2022, her flashy, athletic in-ring work made her stand out in a big way. That said, at this point she still has plenty of work to do in order to become a finished product, as while she could do a lot of cool things, it was the pieces in between those cool things which she hadn't necessarily figured out yet. Thankfully then, as of this year, it feels like she's finally started to do just this, and that's what made her reach such a higher level here. Come on now. Even since the spring, it's been clear that the California native had unlocked something, as it would be then that she scored a pinfall victory of then Women's United States champion Chelsea Green, a win which earned her a title shot after the fact. And while Sol would not win this title shot, it wouldn't mean there wasn't gold coming her way in 2025. No, not only would she become the Women's Speed Champion here after beating Candice LeRae for the honor, she'd go on to win the Women's North American title at Stand and Deliver on April 18th. Obviously, then, this was a huge vote of confidence in her and a sign that management saw the same thing that fans were seeing, and that was a woman who was improving at a rapid pace and who could very easily one day be a breakout star on the main roster too. Yes, it is true that as it stands right now, Sol has lost both of her belts, but that's only because of a kayfabe knee injury. So it seems clear there's a larger story at play here, one which will only elevate her higher up the card of NXT as she inevitably ends up feuding with her tag team partner as of the time of this video's recording, Zarya. And once that happens, it's probably not going to be very long before she's called up to the main roster, at which point the Master of the Soul Snatcher will no doubt go on to have even greater success as she mixes it up with the likes of Io Sky, Rhea Ripley, and Bianca Belair. Hell, we could easily see a situation where, as soon as 2026, she's at very least holding either the Women's United States title or the Women's Intercontinental title. But let's move away from WWE for now and over to AEW instead, as there have been plenty of people who have had a breakout year there too, and who have, in the process, improved their standing greatly, with perhaps the biggest example of this being our next subject, Kyle Fletcher. What a year this guy's had, huh? Sure, it was clear Kyle Fletcher already had something as far back as his days in Japan, where he was primarily a tag team act alongside his Aussie Open partner Mark Davis, but few could have foreseen his rise this far this quickly. After all, upon breaking out into the singles division in 2024, it's been in 2025 that he's really reached another level again by becoming arguably the #1 member of the Don Callis family. And given this is a stable which also includes names like Kazuchika Okada and Konosuke Takeshita, that's saying something, and is only further evidence of how much a future Tony Khan sees in this 26-year-old. Just to put things in perspective, at All In 2023, just 2 years ago, Fletcher was jobbing out in the pre-show when he and Mark Davis got beaten with relative ease by Better Than You, Baby. Flash forward to 2025, however, and he's having a series of show-stealing performances against Will Ospreay, most notably during the pair's steel cage match at Revolution in March. And after that was over, the Australian would continue to be a bit of a human highlight reel as, every time he hit the ring, he could be counted on to have one of the best matches, if not the best match, of any given night, with it being this that led to him ultimately defeating Dustin Rhodes to become TNT champion in July. But even this wasn't Kyle's biggest achievement in 2025. No, his highest achievement was probably being trusted to headline All Out against Hangman Page in a match where the AEW Men's World Championship was on the line. That's right, this was a hell of a vote of confidence in a man who was still in his mid-20s and who was unproven in such a spot then. But given how strong pay-per-view buys appeared to be for this show, especially in the face of direct competition from WWE's WrestlePalooza PLE, it seems it was a gamble which worked, and it's only further established Fletcher as a guy who's destined to be a top player in AEW as the months and years roll on. Really, at this point, if he were to head into All In 2026 as the men's world champion, there defending against Will Ospreay, we wouldn't be surprised. And if this doesn't happen, he should at very least be the one who eventually dethrones the aerial assassin, given the two's history together. But for as much improvement as he's shown in 2025, there might be someone else on the AEW roster who's shown even more. A man who's our next subject as it happens, the mighty luchador superstar that is Bandido. Now, a problem that both AEW and WWE often have is that while they can have some great luchador talent on the rosters, those talents often get lost in the shuffle of the mid-card. It's been the case with people like Commander and the Beast Mortos, just as it's been the case with performers such as Santos Escobar and Cruz del Toro. In the case of Bandido, however, he's proven to be simply too talented to be denied. And this has been evident throughout 2025, as it's been there that following a couple of nasty injuries which put him on the shelf for a while, he's bounced back in a major way to become one of the breakout acts of All Elite Wrestling over the past 12 months. How has he done this? Well, initially it was on the smaller stage of Ring of Honor that the Koalia native really showed what he could do. Yes, far from being the super indie it once was, today ROH is basically serving the purpose of being AEW's developmental league. And with less pressure being on performers to deliver there then, given it's an online exclusive at this point, it means that, like with NXT, more allowances have been made for the roster to try and fail until they find out what's working for them. Not that Bandido did any failing here though. No, if anything, he lifted the whole brand up, as upon winning the ROH World title from Chris Jericho at April 6th's Dynasty, he'd go on to make Ring of Honor's pay-per-views must-see throughout the entirety of 2025. Yes, whether it be his match of the year contender against Konosuke Takeshita at Supercard of Honor, or his almost equally as good bout against Mascarada Dorado and Hechicero at Global Wars and Death Before Dishonor respectively, Bandido has been making a strong case for being the Wrestler of the Year in 2025. And that's not even getting into his main roster run, so to speak, as, after realizing just how much he was killing it on ROH, Tony Khan would call the Mexican-born star up to Dynamite and Collision in the autumn, as from there he began a partnership with Brody King, one named Bandido, who quickly found themselves becoming the AEW Men's World Tag Team Champions. That's right, not content with anchoring just one division, by the time 2025 was in its second half, Bandido was anchoring two, as Bandido's tag title run completely reinvigorated the division and led to some blowaway bouts such as their defense against Kazuchika Okada and Konosuke Takeshita at WrestleDream in October. Sure, Bandido may no longer be the Men's World Tag Team Champions as of the time of this video's recording, but Bandido remains the ROH World Champion, and given the year he's having, that doesn't seem like it's something which is going to be changing anytime soon. But what about the ladies of AEW? Don't they have any acts who have notably improved during 2025? Well, there is at least one who stands out in that respect, our next subject as it happens. Yes, it's time for us to talk about Harley Cameron. Of course, on the surface of things, it should have always been clear that Harley Cameron was going to be a star, as with this being a multi-talented woman, someone who, as well as being a walking ball of charisma, can also cut a promo, sing, and even play the role of ventriloquist. There's no reason she shouldn't have succeeded. That said, there were some questions about how high she would rise in All Elite Wrestling after she debuted there in 2022. Why was this? Well, because AEW has always been a more in-ring focused promotion, and with Harley literally having her first matches here, she was understandably green in that respect. Come 2025 though, while she was still very much a rookie, she'd have been able to improve to the point where Tony Khan felt comfortable pushing her in a more prominent role. And this all led to what is probably the highlight of her career to date, as it was in the lead up to AEW's debut in Australia that the hometown girl found out she'd be wrestling Mercedes Moné for the TBS title. Would she rise to the occasion here, or would she crumble under the pressure? The former, as it happened, because after introducing a new sidekick for herself in the form of puppet Mercedes Moné, Harley Cameron would get more over than she'd ever been before. And this meant that, while she didn't beat the CEO at Grand Slam Australia, she would put on a career-defining performance, one good enough that as the months progressed from there, she'd remain in a prominent position on TV. That's right, as 2025 now draws to a close, it's clear that the Alstonville native has carved out a very nice role for herself on both Dynamite and Collision as a beloved babyface underdog, someone who can work as both a singles act and a tag team one, with this being evident in her recent Babes of Wrath partnership with Willow Nightingale. Hell, so much has she turned out this year, when it came time for Tony Khan to do the first ever women's blood and guts match on November 12th, Harley would be right there in the thick of it, causing absolute bloody mayhem alongside the rest of the ladies. Really, at this point, she's proven herself to be someone who can do pretty much anything which is asked of her. But let's move away from her for now, and back over to WWE, as there's another woman on the Raw roster who's had a similar trajectory of going from rookie to fan favorite by locking up with some main event level acts from the ranks of the Four Horsewomen. Who are we talking about here? Why, Maxxine Dupri, of course. Now, Maxxine Dupri has a lot in common with people like Ruka and Jacy Jayne in that she's also someone who was a complete rookie when she first entered the WWE system. Unlike them though, she never got the chance to start on a smaller stage of NXT where there was less pressure on her to succeed. No, she was put straight onto the main roster and asked to sink or swim. Sure, early on she was mostly a valet to either Maximum Male Models or Alpha Academy, but as of 2025, she's been asked to step into the ring herself more and more, and even though she remains very much a rookie in that regard, she's come on leaps and bounds in a short space of time. How has she done this? Well, working with more experienced talent like Becky Lynch has helped, as throughout this year, Maxine's overarching story has basically been her attempts to defeat the man. And this saw the pair clash 4 times in one-on-one competition, with Becky walking away from the first 3 still the Women's Intercontinental Champion. Come their final encounter though, Dupri would have learned a few tricks that saw her be able to finally dethrone the champ and start her own first run with the gold around her waist. That's right, from someone who'd never even set foot inside a wrestling ring prior to 2022 to a champion. It's been quite a journey for the California native, and as it stands right now, she's managed to be a fighting champ, as she's already been able to make a defense or 2 at live events. So really, she can't be considered anything less than one of the more improved wrestlers of the year, as the jump she's made has been so high, it's something other wrestlers have taken decades to make. The only question left is how much further she'll go in the future. Will she make it all the way to the WWE Women's title or the Women's World title one day? That remains to be seen. But if she can win either of these, she'll have been able to get to that point as a result of the strides she made in 2025. But let's move away from the women for a moment and back over to the men again, as it's in this division we find our next subject, someone who came into WWE with a big head of steam a few years back and ended up stalling after a while. That said, as of 2025, they've been able to start turning things around again and reach a stage where they really have shown improvement, enough to where they could be a top guy eventually. Who are we talking about this time? Who else but Solo Sikoa? Yes, when Solo Sikoa debuted onto the WWE main roster in late 2022 as the newest member of the Bloodline, the assumption was he was going to be the next in line to get a major push, especially as during his time within that group, he was always treated like the silent heavy who even Roman Reigns secretly feared. Unfortunately though, once the Sacramento native eventually took over the bloodline following the Tribal Chief's loss to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 40, things didn't go as planned. Why was that? Well, initially Solo would get a little bit exposed here as someone who wasn't ready for such a major role, and this made the bloodline itself start to feel more like a mid-card act. But ever since rebranding the group as the MFTs in 2025, Sikoa has started to turn things around. And part of the reason he's been able to do that is because he now no longer has to worry about carrying the weight of the bloodline name on his shoulders. Sure, he might not be a main event act as things stand today, but he'd been able to morph into a very solid upper mid-card heel, one who can be used to best effect in something like the United States title division. Hell, that's the level he sits at right now, in fact, with him actually having been in possession of this belt up until recently, and being there has allowed him a chance to grow more than he might have been able to do in the main event scene. Sure, there's still time for Solo to reach the top of the card, but even if he doesn't, he'll have a good spot anyway, and a character which, with its slightly more comedic leanings than before, has gotten over with SmackDown audiences. Really then, after a rocky period, things seem to have worked out for the best for the youngest Uso brother. And if his feud with Jacob Fatu picks back up once the Samoan Werewolf returns from injury, as we expect it will, then the leader of the MFTs has a big-time program waiting on the horizon for him, one which will give him a lot of TV time and even more opportunity to fill any holes in his game as he continues to improve with each passing week. Of course, by the time that feud happens, Solo Sikoa might have even more competition for his spot on the SmackDown roster, as we could be looking at the call-up of someone down in NXT who's had quite a rise in a short space of time. Yes, from complete rookie in 2022 to a potential future ace in the space of just 3 short years, this person has improved tenfold in no time at all. And that's exactly why they're our next subject, Oba Femi. Seriously, what a rise Oba Femi has had. After all, as we said a moment ago, this is someone who only got started in the ring in 2022. But then, given his athletic skills as a former track and field star, as well as the obvious physical benefits of being a man who's 310 pounds and 6'6" in height, perhaps it shouldn't come as a surprise that the Nigerian has been able to get to the point he's currently at so quickly. Even then though, 2025 has to be seen as a particularly successful year for him, as this was the year that, after spending a period as North American champion, he rose all the way to the top of the mountain by dethroning Trick Williams to become NXT World Champion in January, in the process becoming the first ever NIL prospect to do so. Where would Oba go from here? Well, he'd prove to be a dominating champ, as for a large part of the year following this, he'd take on all comers and beat them with relative ease. It didn't matter who it was. Austin Theory, Grayson Waller, Javon Evans, Miles Bourne, and even outside talent like Pro Wrestling Noah's Yoshiki Inamura or TNA's Moose, they all fell to the ruler by the time all was said and done. Hell, even after losing the gold to Ricky Saints at No Mercy on September 27th, Femi wouldn't stay down for long. No, all he'd do is take some time away to dust himself off, all before getting back up again and regaining that title at Deadline on December 6th. And because of this win, then, he'll take on WWE Champion Cody Rhodes at Saturday night's main event on December 13th. Really, given how young he still is and how new he remains to this whole thing, even if he'd had half the success he has, we'd still be impressed. But then we guess that's just what it takes to achieve at the highest level in wrestling. You have to be able to push yourself to a point you exceed people's expectations. Only in doing that can you improve to the point that you're one of those elite few, just like everyone else we've looked at today.